Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the St. Louis Rapid and Blitz Chess Tournament, which is part of the Grand Chess Tour. Now, this event I've played in over the years. I have done very well, but I've also done poorly on some occasions. But it is a combination of 9 games of Rapid Chess and 18 games of Blitz. So, without further ado, let's jump right into the action. Today, I'm playing 3 Rapid games. Now, the first game, I'm playing as the Frenchman, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. He's a player who's kind of dipped a little bit in recent years. Additionally, he's someone that I used to play pretty much in every tournament if you go to the pre-pandemic days, but we actually very rarely compete anymore against each other. I honestly want to say I've maybe played him like 5 times in the last 5 years or something like that. So we haven't really played much, even though we're very familiar with each other, but let's get right into the action. So I start with the move e4. Maxime plays c5, and now I play this move f4. Now, Maxime is someone who generally is very well booked up. I kind of could play knight c3, I could play knight f3, but I kind of want to have some fun, so I go f4. I also figure I'll take Maxime by surprise. We get d5, I play bishop d5, bishop d7, we trade the bishops, and now I play the move d3. Here Maxime plays the move knight c6, I go knight to f3, and now he decides to fianchetto the bishop to g7. Now, black could obviously trade the pawns on e4, trade the queens, and simply play an endgame, but it's a game, it's an endgame, and you kind of maneuver the pieces and go from there. Maxime is somebody who likes to play for counterplay, likes complicated positions. He doesn't want to simplify. So he goes g6. Here I play c3, we get bishop g7, and now I play the move queen to e2. Maxime plays e6, and now I play the move bishop e3, hitting the pawn on c5. Maxime plays b6 to guard the pawn, and now I play the move e5. Now, the reason I put the bishop on e3 is that I really want to play d4 here, and down the road, if black goes knight e7 and d4, followed by knight to f5, I can retreat the bishop, and now these two pieces both guard the critical pawn on d4. Whereas if I don't put the bishop on e3, say we get some position like this, you'll notice that immediately black puts pressure on the pawn, and without bishop on e3 or f2 here, this pawn is a serious weakness. So, back to the game, we get this move f6 here from Maxime. I play d4, taking more space in the center and creating this very nice connect 5. Maxime plays pawn takes pawn. I take back, knight e7, castles, castles, and here I play the move g4, stopping black from putting the knight on this f5 square. Now, at this point, the opening has been a massive success for me. I felt like I was already better here. I'm also up on the clock, so things are very Gucci. So we get rook c8. Here I play the move h3, a quiet move, simply trying to guard the pawn on g4. And now Maxime plays the move b5. Now in this position, I play this move knight to a3 relatively quickly, and it's actually a slight mistake. What I should have played here was knight to d2. And the reason this is such a good move is that if black trades the pawns and goes knight b4, trying to jump with the horse, I can put my knight on b3, and after knight c2, rook c1 takes, and queen e3, I have this nice square for the horse. I'm going to get a bastion on c5. Additionally, say you get some position like this, for example, maybe I even have knight g5 to use D's knights and hit the pawn on e6. Instead, I play the move knight to a3. Maxime goes b4, knight b5, takes, 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 knight b4, and now I get my knight to d6. Now, the knight is very good on d6 here, but I think knight bd2 would have been a little bit easier to play, because after Maxime plays this move rook to c2, here I make a fairly serious mistake with this move queen to d1. The computer really likes this move queen to e1, hitting the knight, and the reason this is so strong is that if black grabs the free pawn on a2, now my queen can potentially go to h4, there's bishop h6, and knight g5, and a lot of threats on top of that. Actually, I realized after knight e2, maybe I have queen b1 here, which might actually win some material after rook c3. Actually, wait, no. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's rook f2. Maybe this is very good for me after takes, takes. I guess the knight is still stuck here, but honestly, this is a little bit dank. Now, I'm just pointing that out because I do know that queen e1 is the best move, but instead I play queen d1, which is also quite decent. Here, Maxime goes rook to c6, trying to attack the knight on the d6 square, and now I play this move knight g5. Now, in this situation, I have achieved everything I could ask for. I'm up 10 minutes on the clock. I have a bastion on d6, I have a nice big white center, and there's even an open b file to use. Now, when Maxime was thinking here before playing this move rook to c6, during the 5 minutes that he was thinking, I was going to play rook to b1 immediately to kick the knight, but as soon as rook c6 was on the board, I figured I'm up a bunch of time. I might as well look for some other options rather than trusting my instincts and simply playing this move. Now, The moves that I considered were bishop d2, rook to b1, or knight g5. And ultimately, I made the mistake here of playing this move knight to g5. If I had played the move rook to b1 here after, let's say, knight c2 in this position, I can simply go bishop to c1. And the knight is really stuck on c2. There are no good squares to go to in this position. And additionally, I have an open b file. I can try to create the kebab on the 7th. And the computer, as you can tell, gives white a big advantage. So I considered rook b1, I saw bishop d2, but then I thought, well, what about knight g5 here, trying to use D's knights and attack on the f-file? And unfortunately, while I was thinking about this knight g5 move, I simply overlooked the reply that Maxime spotted, which was this great move, knight to c8. In this position, the moves that I thought he could play were moves like knight c2, and I thought after takes, and queen to f3, trying to checkmate on f7 and h7, and knight c8 and rook f1, I assumed that I should be better here. Amazingly, the computer says after bishop g7, black is still okay, but this is what I expected to happen. But Maxime found the move knight to c8, and suddenly I realized I've really messed this up here, because now I have no entry on the f7 square. Say I trade the rooks, for example. There's no entry here with queen to f3 because the queen covers the square. On top of that, I have another big issue here, which is, say I just play a move like h4. There's knight to c2, which forks the rook on a1, forks the bishop on e3, and just like that, I'm going to lose the game. Now, keep in mind, this is also the first time that I've played an over-the-board chess tournament since Norway Chess, which I believe ended at the beginning of June. So it's been over 2 months since I've even looked at a physical chessboard. And because of that, after knight c8 was played, I really started thinking to myself, I need to try and be solid here. Just make sure you don't lose the game, because the last time I played in St. Louis in 2022 in the Rapid and Blitz, I actually had a very good position the first game against Dominguez. I messed it up and lost that game. I lost round 2, and after that, it was all downhill. So, after knight c8, I played rook b1. We get the trade of knights, knight c4, bishop c1. Here I'm doing okay, but black does have a great knight on c4, a nice bastion here. Maxime goes rook c8, I play rook b3, we get the trade, he goes h6, I go back, and now he plays queen a4, and here I go rook to b7. After queen c6, rook b1, we get the move rook to f8. And while I am still slightly better according to the computer here, in my mind at this point of the game, I simply wanted to shut it down. So I played queen to d3, we get queen d7 here. I can't take the juicer because then I lose the knight. I go rook b3, queen f7, king g2, we get g5, and here I play this move rook to c3. Now, in this position, Maxime plays this move bishop to h8, which is inexplicably an epic blunder here, because after bishop to h8, I could have won the game with this move h4. If black takes, I take the pawn, he goes rook to b8, and now I have knight to g5 attacking the queen, and after rook b2 here, I can quietly slide the king to h3. There's no check on f1 or f3, and regardless of where the queen moves here in this position for black, white will win the game. But at this point, I simply wanted to make the draw. I was not thinking about winning anymore. I was just trying to avoid a loss. So I played rook b3, and the game ended in a draw after we got a repetition here. We ended up with the rook going to b8 and f8, and the game ends peacefully. So I wasn't super unhappy with the result. I knew I was much better early, but after I missed that opportunity, I was trying to shut it down and just avoid messing up the tournament immediately. So, decent result. I draw the first game. I had some chances, but I simply didn't find the right moves at the critical moments. All right. So, now we move on to the second game where I'm playing with the black pieces against Nodirbek Abdusattorov from Uzbekistan. Now, Nodirbek is one of the absolute premier talented junior players in the world. Maybe he's actually over 20 now, so I'm not sure if he's still considered a junior, but one of the premier up-and-coming kids of the new generation. He is someone who has won the World Rapid Championship before, so a very, very talented kid and a very, very good player as well. I guess those kind of go together. So, Nodirbek has the white pieces. I have the black pieces. We get d4, d5, knight f3, knight f6, and now Nodirbek plays the move bishop f4. Now, of course, this is a classic London is calling opening, also known as the London opening, where white develops the knight and the bishop immediately. Here I play the move c5, we get e3, I go knight c6, Nodirbek plays knight bd2, and here I play the move knight to h5, trying to go after the bishop on f4 right away. Keep in mind that if white tries to play h3 to have the bishop h2 move in case of knight to h5, in this order black can play queen b6, putting massive pressure on the pawns on b2 and d4 immediately. So Nodirbek goes knight bd2, knight h5, bishop g5, h6 is all pretty standard theory here. We get this position with knight to e5, so if I take the bishop, I lose my knight. Here I go takes, knight g7, bishop g3, and now I play this move knight to f5. Now this move is okay, but as soon as I played it, I realized that I had actually confused my lines here. In my files that I had looked at recently, the correct move was to play queen b6, stopping the bishop b5 check, but also pressuring the pawn on b2 right away. Instead, I play knight f5. Nodirbek goes queen to f3, trying to pressure the knight and the pawn. He also has bishop b5, or he can castle his king to the queen side. Here I play the move a6, stopping bishop b5, and now Nodirbek plays bishop d3. Here I trade the knight for the bishop, and I go c4, trying to kick the bishop off of this nice diagonal. Nodirbek goes bishop e2, and here I play queen b6, trying to pressure the pawn on b2, and in this position, Nodirbek decides to castle the king. Now, the computer likes b3 here, but to me, actually, this is kind of a move that I don't think a human would play, because after queen to a5, b takes c4, and something like, I think, is it bishop to e6, or even bishop g7 here, it feels like with the pressure on the pawn at e5, white being unable to castle, even queen c3, black should have quite a bit of compensation. So, Nodirbek decides to castle instead. Here I play the move c3, trying to open up the white queen side, and Nodirbek plays a nice move knight b3. If white were to take here, I can play bishop f5, let's just say knight b3 and e6, and suddenly the king is very loose here. I have rook c8 to pressure the pawns, I have bishop a3, the two b's are extremely active. So Nodirbek goes knight b3 here, I take, he goes king b1 obviously, he doesn't want to take, so after a5 and a4 ideas it gets very dangerous. Probably I should play e6 first, but a5, a4 is coming, and there will be big problems on the b file. So we get king b1, I go bishop f5, Nodirbek plays knight d4, I go bishop g6, he plays e6 here, and now I play the move bishop g7. Now at this point, I'm temporarily up a pawn on b2, but the king is actually extremely safe here. I can't attack it. If I had a knight that I could put on c3 or a3, it would be very good, but I only have these bishops. So here in this position, Nodirbek plays the move bishop d3, and now I make a very big mistake. I play bishop takes knight here. Now this is simply not a good move. What I should have done is I should have castled the king to the queen side here, and I am actually a little bit better. Now in my mind, I didn't really look at this very much. I simply assumed that after like takes, and bishop f5, e6, and something like bishop h3, there's massive pressure on the diagonal, there's like rook d3 lifting the rook, and I simply assumed that white has enough compensation. But if I used my time here instead of playing quickly with this move bishop takes d4, probably the outcome would have been different. Unfortunately, after I take, Nodirbek trades the pawns, takes the bishop on d4, and now white is simply better even though I'm up a pawn. If I were to take a second pawn, there's bishop b5 check, creating the classic fossil, and I lose the game. So, here I decide to castle, Nodirbek plays h4, I go queen f6, and now he plays the move rook e1. So even though I'm temporarily up a pawn, the big issue is I'm going to lose this pawn in the endgame, but also I have these two weaknesses on e5, e7, and g5, and my bishop, this wooden shield, is very, very passive as well. So I go e6 here, getting rid of one of the weaknesses temporarily. Nodirbek plays queen e5, an excellent move here. I trade the queens, and now I play this move g4. Now the computer will say that I could have traded the pawns, and I guess after h5, something like g3, and then king d7 with like rook f8, it's apparently okay, but with all these pawns that are very, very weak on d5, e6, and h5, it simply feels very hard to play from a human perspective. I also think that if Magnus were playing with the white pieces, he would also win this against almost anybody in the world. So it's simply a human issue versus a computer issue. So instead I go g4, we get king takes pawn, now I go rook f8, Nodirbek plays rook f1, I go bishop g8, and this is also probably a slight mistake. What I should have done is play the move king d7. Now I was actually quite worried here that Nodirbek would play something like bishop to e2, and if I put the pawn on h5 and he gets f3, something like this feels very awkward because white has the two kingside pawns and the pawn on h5 is weak. Additionally, the famous YouTuber Levi Rosman was playing a tournament in Italy today where he got all his pawns stuck on the same color as his opponent's bishop and lost a bishop and pawn endgame. Now, I will be recapping that later on, but I did want to point out that was also fresh in my mind as I was playing this endgame. So, here I go bishop g8, trying to attack on the f-file. Nodirbek plays king c3. I go rook f6, bishop e2. And here I inexplicably play this move rook g6. Now, I should have played h5 anyway. And after f3 takes, and bishop f7, white is still better here because the pawn is a big weakness on h5. But at least I'm not losing. Instead, I play the move rook g6. We get king d2. Nodirbek wants to bring the king closer to the king side. And now I play the move bishop to f7. Nodirbek goes rook to b1, and here I play king c7. We get king e3, and now I play this move bishop e8, which effectively loses the game on the spot. What I should have played even here was h5 once again, but by this point, I was so tunneled on not putting this pawn on h5 on the same color as this light square b that I was looking for any other plan, and when I play the move bishop e8, now Nodirbek plays h5, attacking the rook, and I struggle to guard both the pawns. Here I play rook g7, he takes, I take back, and now he finds this great move, rook e b6, and I simply blundered this. I actually thought after rook b6 here, I could simply play rook to e8 check, king to d2, and then king c8. Unfortunately here, white can sack the bishop, because if I take, there's rook to b8, and then rook to b7, simply winning this rook on g7. So at this point, I more or less could resign the game, but I play on, I go king c8, we get takes, I play rook f7, he takes, king c7, he takes, I take f2, we get king d3, I double stack on the 7th, he checks, forces the king back to the 8th rank, and now he takes on h6. Now here I played the move bishop to e8, which is a bad move. I should have tried to check here, because if white runs the king to the center, I can simply check him back. Nonetheless, after king c3 takes king b4, rook b2, and bishop b3, white is going to create some ladders on the back rank, and it is completely winning. Instead, I play the move bishop e8, Nodirbek checks, he checks, and then he plays the move rook to b2. Here I go bishop to a4, and after rook to h8, I resign the game here, because regardless of which square I move the king to, if I go to c7, there's rook d7, king d6, and then rook to d8, bishop d7, and rook takes bishop is simply checkmate. Same thing if I go to d7, by the way, same check, and rook d8. And if I do play the move rook to e8 after takes, and something simple like, I don't know, bishop e6 is good enough, bishop e4 is good enough, white has 3 extra pawns on the queen side and will win. So a very, very disappointing second game in this event. I lose the second game. Now I have 1 draw and 1 loss. I'm on a half point out of 2. Not feeling very good about the result. I've had good positions, though, which should bode well overall. So, in the third and final game of the day, I'm playing with the white pieces against Fabiano Caruana, my teammate from the United States of America. Now, Fabiano also struggling, by the way. He lost in round 2 from a winning position, so he's on half out of 2. So both of us are not very happy with our results. And because of that, I was expecting a very dynamic and explosive game. So we get e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. I go bishop b5. And now Fabiano plays the move knight g e7, developing the knight to the square. Now, this is what's known as the Kozio defense. I believe that Gukesh actually played this in the candidates against Nepo, if I'm not mistaken, in one of the final rounds. Here I play the move knight c3, we get knight to g6, and now I go all in with this move h4, trying to attack with Harry the h-pawn and also playing the style of Alpha Zero. Unfortunately, Fabiano is probably the best prepared player in the world, and he responds immediately with the move knight d4. I go bishop c4, he plays h5, and now I decide to play this move knight g5. Now, I sense that knight g5 was not the right move, but at this point, considering the result and everything that's going on, I thought, throw all caution to the wind and go all in. So I play knight g5, and now Fabiano plays move d5, and here I make a horrible mistake with bishop takes pawn. Now, according to the supercomputers, after knight takes pawn, which is a novelty, by the way, it's a move that's never been played, after knight takes h4, d3, knight takes g2, king f1, and bishop g4, f3, and knight f4, the whole game is a complete mess. I don't even know what's going on. I'll probably study this down the road. I think it was like knight f7, bishop f3. This is simply computer chess. It's something that I'm going to have to look at before I give any conclusive comments, but it is one big mess. Instead, I play the move bishop takes d5, Fabiano plays bishop g4, I go f3, and now he plays this move knight takes h4 after a long think. Now, my best guess about what happened is that Fabiano had not reviewed this specific line right before the game. He probably was familiar with knight takes d5, which is the top computer move, but because he had not reviewed this right before the game, he had to try and figure it out over the board. Now, even though this is actually very bad for white, I'm following the footsteps of one of the greatest chess players of all time, the 5-time world chess champion, Vishwanathan Anand from India, who actually played this against Shankar Mamedyarov very recently. So, we get the move knight takes h4. Now black has 2 pieces hanging on the king side, but my knight is under attack. Now here I play the move d3. If I were to play knight takes f7 here, for example, black can go queen to f6, and even though there are 3 pieces hanging here, I'm going to get miniatured. If I take on g4, knight g2 is spaghetti-o, my king is checkmated. If I decide to play knight takes h8, black can sack the knight, take with a knight, and after king f2 and knight d4, it's a check. I'm going to lose my queen. I'm getting mated. Everything has fallen apart. I'm going to lose inside of 15 moves. So I played d3 here, guarding the knight on g5. Meanwhile, the bishop and the knight are still under attack, and I'm threatening to take the pawn on f7 with either my bishop or my knight. Fabiano goes bishop e7, I take the pawn, and here he plays the move king d7. Now keep in mind, Fabiano is burning through all of his time. He spent 20 plus minutes on the last couple of moves, and he finally makes a mistake with this move king d7. In the game that I mentioned between Anand and Mamedyarov, king to f8 is actually the best move, and after takes and bishop g5 castles, black is actually winning here after bishop takes bishop, queen takes, and pawn takes pawn. Now, if you are not a 3500 computer or you're not familiar with exact theory, it's very hard to play this because you're basically walking into all kinds of fossils on the f-file, and it just feels like this can't be right. But after check, king g8, if bishop takes g4 is played, black can sack the knight here, and after takes, queen h4, black is mating every which way, the knight covers the e6 square as well, and it's all falling apart. So, king to f8 would have actually been winning according to supercomputers. When I spoke to my trainer, Chris Littlejohn, who did look at this, it's apparently -5 after king f8, but after king d7, the game starts anew, and luckily for me, I'm also up nearly 15 minutes on the clock. So I take the bishop, he takes my knight, I take the pawn, and my idea here is to play queen to g4, going after the black king. Fabiano takes, I play king f2, and now he plays the move knight f4. Now, oddly enough, apparently king to f1 is the best move here. I didn't play this move because I thought D's knights are so close, or maybe there are some forks, and it just doesn't feel right. But after king to f2, black has an amazing resource, which is knight to e3 here, sacking a knight, because after takes in this position, now there's queen g5 check, king f2, and after rook h f8, or rook a f8, I should say, suddenly I'm getting absolutely crushed on the open f-file. Black is just winning. Instead, Fabiano plays knight f4. I think Fabiano being low on time definitely contributed to making this mistake with knight to f4. And now after queen to g4, as you can tell from the valuation bar, I'm very much in business here because now I'm hunting the black king, and my king is actually relatively safe on the f2 square. So the game continues with king d6, I take here, and now I spent nearly 7 minutes before playing this move, queen takes g7. Now there are a couple options I considered. One of them that I saw very early on was this creative knight sack with knight b5 check, takes, check, king c5, b4. If you go here, you get mated. And after king takes pawn, rook hb1, king to a5 here, takes. I have nothing better than to start forcing a draw by checking every which way here. Black goes this way, I can check. If you go to d7, you get mated in 1, and after check here in queen c4, the game ends in a draw. It's very unfortunate, by the way, that if we go back to this position, a4 does not actually checkmate after king to a5 because I don't have queen d5. If you go king b4, there would be a mate with check and queen b5. So it's very close to a puzzle rush, but it's not quite there. So at this point, I did consider knight b5 making a draw, but due to the score that I was on and the fact that Fabiano was so low on time, I thought, you know what? You gotta go for it. So here I play the move queen takes pawn after a long think. Now the commentators on my Kick channel, Jose Martinez Alcantara and Fiona Stellantoni, they mentioned that I did have this move knight to e2, which I did consider during my long think, but I thought after queen to f6 with the pressure on the f-file, this simply wasn't all that good. But I can actually trade the knights and go bishop g6 here, and after bishop e3, king g2, and queen f2, I can hide the king on h3 here, and white is still better. Again, very difficult to find because walking into something like bishop e3 with queen f2 is just not very natural. So instead, I spent a lot of time before deciding to play the move queen takes g7, and here my idea is quite simple. I'm up 2 pawns, the pawn on d3 and h5, and I'm hoping to go rook g1 and rook g6 and checkmate the black king. Fabiano goes c6 here, a logical move so that the king can dodge the check on g6, but also it stops me from ever going knight d5, and it allows black to put the queen on b6 as well. So here I go rook h1, Fabiano plays move rook h6. Now it's very difficult to play with so little time. Queen b6 would have actually lost the game because after check, if you go this way, I fork the king and the queen here. And if you go king c7, I fork the king and the queen this way, and after takes and rook takes queen, white will win the game. So Fabiano goes rook h6, trying to stop rook g6, and now I find this move bishop b3. Now I was very, very proud of myself for using my time very well in this game. Unlike in the Maxime game where I had a lot of time and I used time and then made mistakes, in this game I spot the move bishop b3, which is very, very important here because the crux of the position, if I'm trying to win, is that if I ever lose the base of the chain on c2, for example, this pawn on d3 is going to become very weak. Like say, I'm just going to make some random moves here. There's a check and d3 becomes very weak. Additionally, there's a queen b6 as well. So what I really have to do here is I need to guard the base of the chain because if I can guard all these pawns and reach an endgame, the 2 extra pawns pawns should lead to a victory for me. So I go bishop b3. Fabiano plays the move b5 here, trying to restrict squares for the knight or the bishop. He's also hoping to go king c5 and king b6 here, just to illustrate the point. There's no knight a4 check here, and if black can get the king to b6, now the pawns really protect the king, and black is free to start hunting on the f file. So after b5, I play the move knight to e2, and Fabiano plays this move relatively quickly where he trades a knight. Now, I think what happened here is because Fabiano had gotten so on time, in his mind, when I was using 2-3 minutes on these moves, he basically decided if he plays this move, I'll play that move no matter what, just to avoid getting down to 4 or 5 seconds on the clock. So after knight to e2, Fabiano trades knights, and now after king takes e2, king c5 and c3, which stops the queen infiltration on d4, I should be winning here because they're opposite color Bs. My king is actually very safe here. It's a classic Bond Cloud king on e2, best by test. And Fabiano plays king b6. Here I go rook to g6, trying to trade off the rooks and attack, maybe on the 6th rank with bishop to d5. Fabiano trades the rooks, he goes queen d7, and now I start pushing my p with this move h6. Fabiano plays rook d8, trying to win the pawn. I play bishop d5, pinning this pawn on c6, and Fabiano goes king c7. Now, at this point, Fabiano could resign. If he plays the move king a5, I just want to show a couple of neat lines. I can ignore the bishop, push p with h7, because if black takes, I go check, king a4, and the king gets mated on the a file. So Fabiano instead goes king c7, I push the pawn, and now he plays rook h8. If he were to take the bishop here after a queen, if he takes on e4 here, I can probably win many different ways, but the cleanest is to go queen to h7, pinning the queen, and after takes and king to d1, queens come off the board. I still have a second queen, or an extra queen, so 2 queens and a rook are no match for a rook and a bishop. So after h7, Fabiano plays rook h8, I go bishop to e6, attacking the queen. If black moves the queen up, I check the king, and then I collect the rook in the corner. So he goes queen e7, and after I play the move queen to f7, Fabiano resigns the game here because queens are coming off the board, but more importantly, let's say he goes king d6, I'm able to put the rook in jail here on h8, and now I'm free to just move everything over. I can play with the rook on the queen side, and with this rook stuck here with the bishop and pawn, it's simply GG, why not? So I get a very, very big win in the 3rd round against Fabiano Caruana. I moved to 1.5 out of 3, an even score on the day. It's not great, perhaps, in terms of positions I had, but definitely this last game makes up for the mishaps, specifically in round 1, I would say, and all's well that ends well. So wild 3rd game, I get the win. We're on an even score. I think there's somebody on 2.5 out of 3. I think Maxime, if I'm not mistaken, who's leading right now in the rapid portion. But thus far, I'm doing okay. Can't complain thus far. Hopefully, I'll get warmer and warmer as the tournament goes on, but it's a decent start at any rate. So, on that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap from the first day of the St. Louis Rapid and Blitz, which is being held here in St. Louis, Missouri. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and I will be back with some more great recaps. I think tomorrow morning we'll recap Levy's game today from the tournament in Italy. And of course, I'll be recapping these games as well. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys very soon. So once again, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and have a great rest of your day. Keep it real, everybody. Bye.